The brother who never cared for their mother inherited $100,000 from her, while the attentive brother received only an old cabin. However, there is a big surprise inside the cabin. The death of matriarch Collins deeply shook the family. Charles and Peter, her sons, were present for the reading of the will, held in the old office of the family home. Charles, the eldest son, was always close to his mother, while Peter, the youngest, had distanced himself in recent years, focusing on his own life in the city. The tension was palpable in the room when the lawyer opened the will. Charles watched attentively, while Peter impatiently looked at his watch, visibly annoyed with the formality of the moment. "Charles Collins, you inherit the hunting cabin located in Pine Forest, along with all its contents," said the lawyer. "Hunting cabin?" Peter scoffed, releasing a sarcastic laugh. "What are you going to do with an old, dusty cabin in the middle of nowhere, Charles?" Charles remained calm, though he could feel the anger rising within him. "It's not just a cabin, Peter. It was important to Mom, and I'm going to find out why." Peter shook his head, still laughing. "Good luck with that. And what about me?" The lawyer looked at Peter with a neutral expression. "Peter Collins, you inherit $100,000 in cash." Peter's eyes lit up. "Now that's a real inheritance." The reading of the will revealed the growing gap between the brothers. Peter mocked Charles's inheritance, treating the cabin as a worthless burden. Charles, however, felt a strange attachment to the idea of exploring the place, determined to honor his mother's memory. "I can't believe you're actually going to waste time on this," Peter continued. "But good luck, brother. I'll spend my money more wisely." Charles took a deep breath, ignoring the taunts. "Everyone makes their own choices, Peter. I'm going to the cabin this weekend. I'm sure there's more there than you think." The following weekend, Charles drove to the cabin in Pine Forest. The road was long and winding, surrounded by tall trees that formed a natural tunnel. Upon arrival, he found the cabin covered in dust and cobwebs, clearly abandoned for years. "Well, here we are," Charles said to himself, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Let's see what we have here." Inside, the air was thick, and the smell of old wood filled the space. Charles began to explore, passing through old furniture and objects that seemed forgotten in time. As he moved an old bookshelf, he noticed something peculiar, a loose floorboard. "This is interesting," he murmured, kneeling to examine the board. With a bit of effort, he removed it, revealing a secret compartment. Inside was a well-preserved wooden box. His hands trembled with excitement and anxiety as he opened the box, revealing a collection of rare watches and old jewelry, all carefully stored. "Wow," he said, amazed. "This is incredible." Charles was astonished. The relics were not only financially valuable, but also emotionally significant, representing moments and memories from his mother's life. He felt a deep connection with her at that moment, realizing that the cabin, once scorned, was a hidden treasure. "Now I understand, Mom," he whispered, holding one of the old watches. "You knew I would find this, didn't you?" With a heart full of gratitude and determination, Charles decided he would protect and cherish this legacy, no matter what Peter said or did. Peter quickly found a way to spend his inheritance. Drawn to the adrenaline and promise of quick gains, he plunged into the world of gambling. Initially, luck seemed to be on his side, but soon the losses began to pile up, leaving him with significant debts. "You're running out of luck, Peter," said one of his gambling friends, watching Peter lose another round of poker. "It's none of your business," Peter snapped back. "I just need one good round to recover everything." But luck was not on his side that night. Leaving the casino, Peter went to a local bar to try to drown his frustrations. At the bar, he encountered an old acquaintance, Mike, who had been a close friend in childhood. "Peter, it's been a while," exclaimed Mike, slapping Peter on the shoulder. "How have you been?" "Mike, you have no idea," Peter replied, accepting the drink offered. "Things are not going well. I've lost almost everything in gambling." Mike looked at him with a curious expression. "Really? I thought you had received a good inheritance recently." Peter sighed. "I did, but I've already spent most of it. I wasn't as lucky as I hoped." Mike frowned, thinking about something. "I heard that your brother Charles found something valuable in your mother's old cabin. Some local folks have been talking about it." "What?" Peter asked, intrigued. "What are you talking about?" "Yes," continued Mike. "It seems he found some old watches and jewelry. People say it's worth a good chunk of money." Peter's envy quickly turned into anger. He couldn't believe that Charles had had such luck. On the ride back home, flashbacks of their childhood passed through his mind. He always felt that Charles was the favorite, the son who always did everything right. Why does he always get everything? Peter muttered to himself. I deserve a part of that. When he got home, Peter threw himself on the couch and stared at the ceiling. He remembered all the times his mother seemed to prefer Charles. In school, Charles was the exemplary student, while Peter always seemed to be in trouble. I remember that time Mom came to pick me up at the police station, Peter thought. She was so disappointed, but when Charles won that science award, she couldn't stop smiling. Envy ate away at Peter from the inside. He always thought his mother liked Charles more, and now, this discovery in the cabin only seemed to confirm it. Peter began to plan how he could claim part of Charles's treasure. He can't keep all of it for himself, Peter thought. I have to do something about it. I've always been left out, but not this time. With a heart full of grudge and envy, Peter decided he would find a way to claim what he considered rightfully his, no matter what it took. Charles was in the kitchen, preparing tea, when Ellen walked in. She had a special glow in her eyes, a glow that Charles loved. How was it at the cabin? Asked Ellen, caressing her belly protectively. Charles smiled. It was amazing, Ellen. I found a secret compartment full of old watches and jewelry. It was like Mom had left a treasure for us. Ellen approached and hugged Charles. That's wonderful, love. But what are you going to do with all this? Charles sighed. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to sell everything and ensure we're financially secure. But another part feels I should keep these relics, as a legacy from Mom. Ellen looked into Charles's eyes with a worried expression. And Peter? Do you think he'll accept this peacefully? I doubt it, Charles replied, shaking his head. He's already envious. I'm sure he'll try to claim part of it. Then maybe you should talk to your dad, suggested Ellen. He might give you some advice on how to deal with Peter and protect what's ours. Charles nodded. You're right. I'll visit him tomorrow. We need to resolve this before things get out of hand. The next day, Charles drove to his father's house. They sat in the garden, where his father liked to spend his afternoons. Dad, I need to talk to you about something important, began Charles, explaining everything he had found in the cabin and his concerns about Peter. Charles's father listened attentively, nodding occasionally. You did well to tell me, son. Knowing Peter, he won't give up easily, but you have the right to protect your mother's legacy. I just want to do what's right, said Charles, sighing. But I don't want to create more problems in the family. Sometimes doing what's right means facing conflicts, replied the father. But you're not alone in this. Ellen and I are here to support you. And remember, honesty and justice always prevail in the end. Charles felt a weight lift from his shoulders. With the support of his family, he was ready to face any challenges that lay ahead. Peter showed up unannounced at Charles's house. It was clear he was agitated, pacing back and forth in the front yard while waiting for Charles to open the door. Upon seeing his brother's state, Charles felt a chill. Peter, what are you doing here? Asked Charles, trying to stay calm. We need to talk, Peter responded, entering without waiting for an invitation. I heard you found a bunch of valuable things in the cabin. Watches, jewelry. Is that true? Charles sighed, realizing the situation was going to get complicated. Yes, I found some things that belonged to Mom. But it's not that simple, Peter. Not that simple? Of course it is. Peter stepped closer, the anger evident on his face. I have a right to part of that too. I'm your brother, for God's sake. You received your part of the inheritance, Peter. The money Mom left for you, Charles said, trying to keep his voice calm. These relics are more than just monetary value. They hold deep emotional significance. That's ridiculous, Peter retorted with disdain. You think you can keep everything just because you think you deserve more? I'm her son too. The argument heated up. Peter used every emotional trick he could think of, trying to manipulate Charles. You've always been the favorite, haven't you? Always doing everything right, while I'm the failure. Well, that ends now. I want my share, Charles. This isn't about favoritism, Charles replied, his patience wearing thin. This is about respecting what Mom wanted. I won't let you destroy that out of greed. Greed? You're calling me greedy? Peter advanced, his eyes flashing with anger. I have debts, Charles. Debts that could ruin my life. You have a family, you're expecting a child. Can't you understand that I need help too? Charles fell silent for a moment, feeling the tension build. I understand you're in a tough situation, Peter. but that doesn't justify you trying to take something that isn't yours. I'll seek legal help if necessary." "Would you do that? Take your own brother to court?" Peter asked incredulously. "If it protects Mom's legacy, yes, I would," Charles answered firmly. The next day, Charles decided to seek professional help. He scheduled an appointment with a renowned lawyer in town, Mr. Thompson. Sitting in the elegant office, Charles explained the entire situation, from discovering the relics to the confrontation with Peter. "What I want to know is how I can legally protect these relics," said Charles, anxious. Mr. Thompson listened attentively, jotting down important points. "I understand your concern, Charles. First, we need to establish that these items are part of your legitimate legacy. Do you have the inheritance documents?" "Yes, I brought everything." Charles handed over a folder of documents to the lawyer. As Mr. Thompson reviewed the papers, he explained, "If the relics were specifically left to you and not mentioned in the will as part of the general division, then you have a strong case. However, Peter can challenge this based on financial need, but that doesn't guarantee he'll succeed." Charles took a deep breath. What if he tries something more drastic? "You should be prepared for anything," Mr. Thompson replied. "I'll start preparing the necessary documentation to ensure that these items are legally recognized as part of your legacy. This will give us a stronger position in any future disputes." Meanwhile, Peter wasted no time. He contacted a lawyer known for his questionable ethics, Mr. Lawrence. Seated in Lawrence's dark, dimly lit office, Peter explained his situation, emphasizing his debts and Charles's discovery. "So, you want a share of the treasure your brother found," said Lawrence, stroking his chin. "We might find some legal loopholes, especially if he hasn't properly registered these items as part of his inheritance." "I need that money, Lawrence. I can't let Charles keep it all," said Peter, the anxiety evident in his voice. "Let's see what we can do," Lawrence replied with a sly smile. "I'll prepare a plan to challenge the possession of these relics. We'll make Charles prove that they belong exclusively to him." The tension between the brothers escalated as both prepared for a possible legal battle. Charles, with the support of Ellen and Mr. Thompson, was determined to protect his mother's legacy. Peter, with the help of Lawrence, was willing to do anything to get what he considered his rightful share. Ellen felt a wave of emotions when the pregnancy test turned positive. She and Charles had been trying for some time, and now, with all the family tension, the news was a ray of hope. Eager to tell Charles, she waited until he returned from work. "Charles, I have a surprise for you," said Ellen, trying to contain her smile as he walked through the door. Charles noticed Ellen's radiant expression. "What happened? It looks like you have good news." Ellen handed the pregnancy test to him. "We're expecting a baby, Charles." Charles's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "That's wonderful, Ellen. I can hardly believe it. We're going to have a child." They embraced, feeling the joy and hope growing inside them. The pregnancy news brought a new layer of concern, but also strengthened Charles's determination to protect his mother's legacy for the future of their child. "This changes everything," said Charles, caressing Ellen's belly. "Now, more than ever, I need to ensure that our child has a secure future and that Mom's legacy is preserved." "I know," Ellen replied, "and I'm here to support you in everything. We'll face this together, Charles." The following days were filled with preparations and plans. Ellen underwent medical exams, and the couple started discussing names and dreaming about the future. Each moment of tenderness between them reinforced their love and mutual support, creating a solid foundation to face the challenges ahead. "We'll overcome this, Ellen," Charles said one night as they lay in bed. "We'll protect our family and ensure our child grows up in a safe and loving environment." "I believe in you, Charles," Ellen replied, holding his hand. "We'll make it." The news of Ellen's pregnancy gave Charles a new perspective and renewed strength to face Peter. However, Peter was not backing down. He intensified his attempts to obtain the treasure, now threatening to take Charles to court. Charles received a court summons, and the stress began to mount. "He's really willing to go this far," Charles said, reading the document. "This is going to be a tough battle." "We need to be prepared," Ellen said, trying to stay calm. "Let's talk to Mr. Thompson and see what our options are." In the lawyer's office, Mr. Thompson explained what they could expect from the legal process. Peter will argue that he is entitled to a part of these relics due to his financial situation. "We need to build a solid case showing that these items are indeed part of your legitimate inheritance." "What if he convinces the judge?" Charles asked, worried. "We have to be ready for all possibilities." Thompson replied. "But with the documents you have and your mother's testimony, we have a good chance of winning." Back home, Charles and Ellen discussed strategies to handle the situation without compromising family peace. "Maybe we should try mediation before going to court," Ellen suggested. "It could be a way to resolve this without so much tension." "It's worth a try," Charles agreed. "I'll talk to Mr. Thompson about this possibility." Tension grew as the date of the court hearing approached. Each day seemed to bring a new worry, and Charles began to feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. But every time he saw Ellen caressing her belly, he knew he was doing the right thing. "No matter what happens," Charles said one evening while they were in the living room, "we will protect our family and Mom's legacy. That's the most important thing." Ellen held Charles's hand, feeling his determination. "We're in this together, Charles, and we'll come out stronger on the other side." As the date of the hearing approached, Charles and Ellen continued to support each other, strengthening their bond and preparing for the battle ahead. The hunting cabin, silent and secluded, was chosen as the venue for the family meeting. Charles hoped the tranquil setting would help ease tensions. Ellen was by his side, firmly holding his hand. The first to arrive were his father and some close family friends, followed by Peter, who entered with a defiant look. The presence of his lawyer, Mr. Lawrence, indicated that Peter was not willing to resolve things amicably. "Let's begin," said Charles, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've called this meeting to try to resolve our differences amicably. I don't want this to go to court." Peter laughed humorlessly. "Amicable? You want to keep everything for yourself, Charles. How is that amicable?" Charles took a deep breath. "That's not it, Peter. I want to ensure that Mom's legacy is respected." "Respected? That's a joke. You've always been the perfect son, haven't you?" Peter started to raise his voice. "Always thinking you know what's best for everyone. But I'm her son too, and I have a right to what's mine." Charles's father tried to intervene. "Peter, understand that Charles isn't trying to exclude you. These relics have sentimental value to him. There are other ways to resolve this." "Other ways?" Peter scoffed. "Like what? Letting him keep everything while I'm stuck with debts?" "We can negotiate," suggested Ellen calmly. "There's a way to resolve this without fighting." "Negotiate? I don't want to negotiate. I want what's rightfully mine." Peter was furious, and the tension in the room escalated. A family friend, present at the meeting, spoke in a conciliatory tone. "Let's all calm down. We're here to find a solution, not to argue." But the words fell on deaf ears. The meeting quickly devolved into an exchange of accusations and verbal confrontations. Charles and Peter faced off, airing old resentments and unhealed wounds. "You were never there when Mom needed you most," said Charles, his voice filled with emotion. "You were busy with your own life, while I took care of her." "That's easy for you to say," retorted Peter. "You always had everything, never had to struggle for anything." Peter's words revealed the depth of his envy and bitterness. The atmosphere was charged, and the meeting ended without an agreement, but with a decision that the case would have to be resolved in court. The family meeting had left everyone shaken, but Charles knew he needed to act quickly. The next day, he gathered the documents and evidence he had and scheduled another meeting with Mr. Thompson. "We need to be prepared for anything," said Charles as he showed the documents to the lawyer. "Peter is determined to take this to court." Mr. Thompson examined the papers attentively. "You have a solid case, Charles. We need to focus on proving that these relics were specifically left to you, and that Peter is trying to manipulate the situation." Meanwhile, Peter did not give up on his attempts. He called another meeting, this time at their father's house, to try to gain the support of family and friends. The room was filled with concerned relatives and close friends, all waiting to hear what Peter had to say. "Thank you for coming," began Peter, trying to appear conciliatory. "I'm just trying to get what's rightfully mine. I don't want to fight, but I also can't accept being left out." Charles arrived at the meeting prepared to expose Peter's true intentions. He stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. "Peter, it's time to stop this manipulation. Everyone here needs to know the truth." Peter's eyes narrowed, and he stared at Charles suspiciously. "What are you talking about, Charles?" Charles took a deep breath and began to lay everything out. "Peter isn't interested in the sentimental value of these relics. He's in a tough financial situation and is trying to use that as an excuse to take something that isn't his." The room fell silent as Charles continued. I found evidence that Peter has gambling debts and plans to sell the relics to pay off those debts. This isn't about equal rights or justice. It's about greed. The family and friends' reaction was mixed. Some were shocked and supported Charles, while others, still sympathetic to Peter, questioned his intentions. "That's a lie!" shouted Peter, visibly shaken. "You're making this up to discredit me." "I'm not making anything up," replied Charles calmly. "I have documents that prove your debts. All I want is to protect our mother's legacy." Charles's father, with a sad expression, intervened. "Peter, if this is true, you need to be honest. We're here to help, but we can't support lies and manipulations." Peter fell silent, his anger turning into despair. I just wanted what's mine. I'm desperate, Charles." Peter's confession confirmed what Charles suspected. With a decision to take the case to court, the tension escalated, but the truth had finally been exposed. "We'll settle this in court," said Charles, his voice firm, "and we'll do it fairly." The atmosphere in the room was heavy with emotions. Some family members approached Charles, offering words of support. "We're on your side, Charles. We know you just want to do what's right," said a close cousin. Others, still loyal to Peter, expressed their concerns. "Peter, you need to sort out your debts and your life. It's not fair to try to take what isn't yours," said an uncle, his voice stern. Charles approached his father, who looked aged by the tension of the past days. "Dad, I know this is hard for you, but I'm trying to protect what Mom wanted." Charles's father nodded slowly. "I know, son. I just wish you two could find a way to resolve this without tearing our family apart." Peter, seeing the impact his actions had on the family, finally set aside his anger. "I've made mistakes, many mistakes, but I'm willing to face the consequences. I don't want to lose my family over this." Charles looked at his brother, feeling a mix of compassion and sadness. "Peter, there's a chance for redemption, but you need to be honest and take responsibility for your actions." Peter nodded, visibly moved. "I'll do that, Charles. I promise." The tension eased slightly, but everyone knew the next step would be crucial. "See you in court," said Charles, ending the meeting. "Let's let justice decide." With the truth exposed and the next steps clear, the family prepared for the legal battle ahead, knowing that their future was at stake. News of the family dispute between Charles and Peter spread quickly through the small community. Friends and neighbors, who had known the Collins family for years, began to mobilize to offer support. One afternoon, while Charles was in the cabin reviewing documents, he heard knocks on the door. Opening it, he found Mrs. Miller, a longtime neighbor, accompanied by other community members. "Charles, we've heard about the situation," said Mrs. Miller with a welcoming smile. "We wanted you to know that we're here to support you and your family." Charles was moved. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. This means a lot to us." Mr. Johnson, one of the neighbors, stepped forward. "If you need anything at all, we're here. This community has always been close-knit, and we know how much your mother meant to all of us." "I really appreciate that," responded Charles, feeling a wave of gratitude. "I'm doing my best to protect her legacy." The days that followed were filled with visits from friends and neighbors, offering advice, emotional support, and even practical help with the legal preparations. Ellen, watching the community come together, felt strengthened. "We're all in this together, Charles," said Ellen, as they welcomed more visitors. "This shows how much your mother was loved by everyone." Meanwhile, Peter began to realize the consequences of his actions. Isolated and with the pressure of the impending legal battle mounting, he reflected on the path he had chosen. One night, he went to the cabin where Charles was working. "Charles, can we talk?" he asked, in a tone less aggressive than usual. Charles looked at his brother, surprised. "Of course, Peter. Come in." Peter entered, visibly shaken. I don't know what to do anymore. The debts, the trial, it's all falling apart." Charles sighed. "Peter, I don't want to see you destroyed by this, but you need to understand that what you're doing isn't fair." "I know," admitted Peter, his eyes filled with regret. "I was greedy and let it consume me, but I don't know how to get out of this." "Maybe there's still time to sort things out," said Charles, "but we need to do it the right way." The support from the community and the opening of a sincere dialogue between the brothers strengthened Charles's resolve to move forward and protect his mother's legacy. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was filled with friends, neighbors, and community members there to support Charles. Peter sat across, visibly nervous. The atmosphere was tense, each person feeling the weight of the decision that was to come. The judge entered, and everyone stood up. "We are here to resolve the dispute over Mrs. Collins's inheritance. Both parties, please present your evidence." Mr. Thompson, Charles's lawyer, spoke first. "Your Honor, here are the documents that prove the relics were specifically left to my client, Charles Collins. We also have witnesses who can confirm Mrs. Collins's intention to leave these items to him." Charles watched intently as the judge examined the documents. Each second seemed like an eternity. Finally, the judge looked up. "Let's call the first witness," said the judge. Charles's father took the witness stand, his face serious and solemn. "Mr. Collins, can you tell us about your wife's intentions regarding the relics?" "Of course, Your Honor," he began. "My wife was very clear about wanting to leave these items to Charles. They have immense sentimental value and represent our family history. She knew that Charles would appreciate and care for them properly." The room fell silent, absorbing the poignant words of Charles's father. When it was Peter's turn, Mr. Lawrence tried to argue that Peter was entitled to part of the relics due to his financial difficulties. "Your Honor, my client, Peter Collins, is facing significant financial difficulties. Dividing these assets could help alleviate his situation, and it's only fair that he receives a part." Peter, nervous, watched as his lawyer spoke. He knew his gambling debts and manipulation would be hard to explain, but he still hoped. "Mr. Peter Collins," said the judge, "can you explain why you believe you are entitled to these items, apart from your financial situation?" Peter stood up, his voice slightly trembling. "Your Honor, I've made mistakes, many mistakes. But these items, they're part of our family. I just wanted a chance to stand up again, to redeem myself." The judge considered both sides, weighing the information presented. After hours of testimony and evidence presentation, he finally made his decision. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mrs. Collins intended to leave these relics specifically to Charles Collins. Therefore, I rule in favor of Charles Collins. As for Mr. Peter Collins, I recommend that he seek financial and legal counseling to deal with his debts appropriately. Peter bowed his head, defeated. Charles, relieved, thanked the judge and his lawyer. "Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Mr. Thompson, for all your help." After the trial, the community gathered at Charles and Ellen's home to celebrate. The atmosphere was one of relief and happiness. "You did the right thing, Charles," said Mrs. Miller, raising a glass. "Your mother would be proud of you." Ellen, holding Charles's hand, smiled. "Now we can focus on building our future, without worries." Peter, though defeated, approached Charles, his eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry for everything, Charles. I hope one day you can forgive me." Charles looked at his brother, compassion in his eyes. "I forgive you, Peter. Let's move forward and try to rebuild what was lost." Peter nodded, visibly moved. "Thank you, Charles. I'll try to be a better person." With peace restored and the community united, Charles and Ellen prepared for the arrival of their baby. The family was ready for new beginnings, strengthened by the challenges overcome and the assurance that Mrs. Collins's legacy would be preserved for future generations. "We're ready for this new phase," said Charles, holding Ellen's hand as they looked towards the future with hope and determination. If you enjoyed this moving story, don't forget to like the video, leave your comment about what you thought, and suggest new topics. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Remember, the true value lies in the memories we keep and the relationships we build.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! Is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated. making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? "I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.